Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to destroy some belief systems today, and we're also going to talk about the dark night of the soul and everlasting life and what it means to have everlasting life. In the Bible, it talks a lot about those that come to Christ have everlasting life. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to have to become like a tree in the desert that grows its own source of water, or finds its own source of water and grows its own leaves and finds its own ability to survive in the heat of the day and the cold of the night. It's about finding the light so that you can grow into a bigger tree than before. Because at the end of the day, you're either growing or you're dying. And something that I've realized about everlasting life is that when you have everlasting life, you fight every day as if you're dead. And I don't mean dead in the sense of spiritually dead. I mean dead in the sense of you have nothing left to lose because freedom has been attained. That is spiritual freedom. And so the dark night of the soul is often referred to as a stage in personal development or spiritual development when you are often removed by God's presence to some degree, or you realize that you've removed yourself from God's presence. And it can also be described as a very difficult time in your life. The reason that I want to talk about the tree is because a couple years ago when I was participating in psychedelic experiences, at one point in the trip that I was on, I was in complete silence and darkness. And I was all alone, and there was just geometric fractals starting to form at the rise of the trip, and there was audio hallucinations happening, and then all of a sudden it was like I just kind of crossed a threshold of spiritual reality, and I saw this tree in the shape of a circle, and the circle started to grow from the seed into the tree itself. And so the tree's roots reached down deep into the ground, and the branches reached up really high above the sky. But there was always this orb around the tree, and it was as if it was like God's protection around this tree. And I didn't understand the meaning of the tree until the last few days. Over the last couple weeks, I've had a lot of different experiences putting myself through a lot of physical, strenuous activities. And I've increased the amount of physical activity I've been doing by nearly 80%. And while it's been very, very great and proactive, it's also been very tiring as well. And so I've had to really watch more what I'm eating and really care more about myself and really give myself the proper nutrition that my body needs. And over the course of the last couple of days, it kind of came out of nowhere where I just suddenly got the message of that psychedelic experience. It was that at that time I was going through what you, I guess, could call the dark night of the soul 2 years ago. And it was, I guess we should also say that the dark night of the soul, it's not just like a one-time thing. Like you can have several dark nights of the soul, but really what the dark soul symbolizes in a lot of mystical spiritual terms is that it's your soul's purification into godliness. And so your soul is being purified, and you're waking up to the real world, so to speak. And so anyway, at the time I was going through this dark night of the soul, and it was at like the kind of like the tipping point where I had reached the peak of the dark night of the soul, like well, I guess you could say the valley, the deepest valley. In this case, it was the deepest valley. And I was kind of like on my way back up. And I was seeing in that moment the tree symbolized the desert of the soul, and how the tree must be grown in that desert all on its own, but it will be protected by God. And it's given me a lot to think about of like, can you or can you not handle what God is giving you and what you're asking God for? Because sometimes you might not realize that you're being tempted. And then other times it's almost like something feels so good that you don't want to pursue it, because the pursuing of it means that you might risk failure or rejection and whatever it is and what you're striving for. And you'd rather let slip away something that might be really good for the sake of just not having to put in the work to make the proper discernments. And it's really important to note that when you can't make proper discernments, there's likely some kind of confusion being involved, and there's likely some kind of demonic forces involved. So that is something to be wary in the dark night of the soul as well. It's that you're this is the deep shadow work that a lot of people talk about, but very few truly understand the depths of which you can go to in this stage. At the time that I was dealing with my dark night of the soul, at that point in the psychedelic story, I was dealing with betrayal, which, if anybody's read Dante's Inferno, betrayal is actually the deepest pit of hell, or like the deepest level of hell. So it was, for me, I was dealing with a lot of trust issues and trust problems where I couldn't feel like I was associated with people in the real world. And it was like I had to just rely on my own self. And that felt very isolating. But that orb was very comforting around the tree. I didn't know why at the time. I didn't know exactly what it was. But now it was revealed to me that this was God's protection, and that God is not going to give you what you can't handle, but be prepared for when you ask for something from God and he gives it to you. The question is are you able to handle it? Let's say you want a job or a relationship or something, some kind of vacation to go on, or I don't know, something like that, and you finally get the opportunity to do it. But then the cost of that opportunity might be conflicting with your values. It might be conflicting with your principles, and you might have to give up that opportunity. I know I was tempted by demonic forces to get more money from a job about a year and a half ago as well, where I would be making almost 75% more of what I'm making now. But I had to get the the right prescribed social inclusion of like verifying that I'm of the group, let's say. I don't want to say anything on on YouTube, mainly because I don't want to get striked, but anybody that is watching knows that I'm talking about a certain jab that we had to get at one point or another, and luckily I chose not to pursue that job because of it, but it was very tempting at the time. And so a lot of these like opportunities came up where I could be doing more and making more money, but money really isn't what life's about. Money can help you grow, of course, but it's not going to be the end all be all of this life. It really is a strange time. We are fighting a spiritual war every day, whether we know it or not. When I look outside and I see all of these people that they're living their life without a seeming care in the world, but that's because they're so glued to their own problems that they don't realize that there's other people sometimes, and that's really what I want to encourage on this channel, is that you are not alone in this, and that though you may be going through the dark night of the soul right now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to make it. You have to go through it. And that's really what everlasting life is as well, is that you don't get over life, you get through it. That's really what Jesus was preaching, I think, and it feels true and it sounds true to me, and it's helped me a great deal in my life understand just the undergoing difficulties of everyday life, and that some days you're just not going to want to do the things that you have to do, even though you have to do it. So you can either feel your emotions and not let them control you, or feel your emotions and let them dictate your actions like a slave. Do you want to be a slave? Do you want to be a miserable, bitter, restless, anti-social, anti-human, anti-love person? Is that really what you want? Of course not. Of course not. If you're going through the dark night of the soul right now, and you're feeling a lot of apathy, like I know I did at one point. I was feeling very apathetic. I'm just about, and nihilistic as well. It's that kind of mindset is not going to help you at all. Even though you may think that it's true, that the world is nihilistic and the world is just a sad place to live. And you know what? Like, the world is hard, but that shouldn't change how you feel about yourself and your heart. You have a fire to give. You have a life to share. You have a love to share. Don't give up on yourself, and don't give up on the goodness and the purity and the innocence of life. With that being said, I hope this message was useful and informative. And until next time, may peace be with you.